His dog started digging like it had found something alive beneath the dirt. But Ethan knew no animal reacts like that unless something is wrong or hidden. The blade slipped in his hand as the tree cracked, sharp, hollow, and Koda snapped toward the tree line, low growl cutting through the quiet. Ethan froze mid-step, breath tight, the smell of fresh wood and cold earth rising around him. Something moved out there, but then it didn't. What do you think was out there? The radiator clicked twice before it gave up trying to sound alive. Ethan Cole noticed that before anything else. Not the lawyer's voice, not the scraping of chairs, not even the two men sitting across from him, already leaning back like the room belonged to them. Just the radiator. Click, pause, click. He kept his eyes on it for a second longer than necessary, counting the silence between each sound, the way he used to count seconds between distant thumps in a place that didn't forgive mistakes. Mr. Cole? The lawyer's voice pulled him back. Ethan shifted his gaze without moving his head. The room came into focus in pieces. The desk, the papers, the window with a strip of gray Montana sky pressed against it. Across from him, Ryan Cole had one ankle resting on his knee, tapping his phone with his thumb like this was a meeting he needed to get through. Beside him, Mark sat quieter, hands folded, but his eyes kept flicking toward the documents like they were already his. They probably were. Koda sat at Ethan's side, pressed close to his leg. The dog hadn't moved since they walked in. Ears forward, body still, watching. Not relaxed, not curious. Watching. The estate has been divided according to your grandfather's final will, the lawyer said, flipping a page that didn't need flipping. Assets include the main ranch property, associated equipment, and liquid accounts. Wrong. Ryan leaned forward before the sentence finished. That'll be me, he said, already reaching for the pen. The lawyer didn't correct him. Ethan's eyes shifted. Not to Ryan, to the man's hands. Clean nails. No dirt. No hesitation. Mark spoke next, softer. And the house? That transfers to you, the lawyer said, as stated. Mark nodded once like he'd expected nothing less. No one looked at Ethan. Koda's ears twitched. The radiator clicked again. Ethan's fingers rested on his knee, still, but not loose. There was tension in them, the kind that never really left, the kind that waited. Mr. Ethan Cole, the lawyer continued, finally turning another page that mattered. You have been assigned the remaining parcel of land located off County Road 17, approximately 70 acres, classified as non-productive timber acreage. There was a small pause. Ryan exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. The backwoods, he said. That place is nothing but brush and dead ground. The lawyer didn't respond. Ethan didn't either. He watched the paper as it slid across the desk toward him. 70 acres. No buildings listed. No accounts attached. No valuation printed. Just coordinates. Boundaries. Lines on a page that meant something to someone who had taken the time to draw them. Ryan stood up first, already done. Well, he said, clapping his hands together lightly. Guess that wraps it up. He turned to Ethan, smile easy, hand already extended. Hey, Ryan said, at least you got something. Koda's head lifted a fraction. Ethan didn't take the hand right away. He looked at it, then past it, then back again. Ryan held it there, patient in the way people are when they know the outcome doesn't matter. Finally, Ethan reached out. Their hands met. Ryan's grip was firm, warm, confident. a handshake that closed things. Ethan's hand didn't tighten back. It just existed there, long enough to end the moment. Mark stood next, adjusting his cap, eyes dropping briefly to the floor before lifting again. "You'll figure something out," he said, not quite meeting Ethan's gaze. Then he followed Ryan out. The door opened, closed. Bootsteps faded down the hall. Silence settled in. The radiator clicked once more, then stopped. The lawyer gathered his papers without looking up. "If you need copies, I'm good," Ethan said. His voice came out level, not quiet, not loud, just placed where it needed to be. He didn't look at the lawyer again. Instead, his eyes shifted to the door. Stayed there. Not staring, not lost. Tracking. The angle of the frame, the space beneath it, the shadow line where it met the floor. A habit. Clear the room. Identify exits. Know what moves and what doesn't. Koda stood slowly. No command given. The dog glanced once toward the door, then back at Ethan, waiting. Ethan picked up the paper at last, folded it once without reading it, and slid it into his jacket. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping just enough to echo. Then he walked to the door. Koda moved with him, shoulder brushing his knee, silent as a shadow. At the threshold, Ethan paused. Not long. Just long enough to look down the empty hallway. Nothing moved. No voices, no footsteps. Clear. He stepped out anyway. The air outside the building hit colder than it should have. Thin mountain wind slipping through the street, carrying the smell of dust and distant pine. Ethan stood there for a second, letting his eyes adjust to the light. Koda stood beside him, ears still forward, gaze scanning the street like it expected something to come out of it. Nothing did. Cars passed slow. A man crossed the road with a grocery bag. Somewhere a screen door slammed. Ethan's shoulders didn't drop. They never really did. He reached into his jacket, pulled the folded paper back out, and looked at it for the first time. 70 acres. Coordinates. A place he hadn't seen in over a decade. He stared at it a moment longer. Then he folded it again. Koda shifted closer, pressing lightly against his leg. Ethan didn't look down. "Yeah," he muttered, more to the wind than the dog. Then he turned toward the parking lot where his old truck waited. Koda followed without hesitation, like he always did. The truck door groaned when Ethan pulled it open, the sound dragging across the quiet like metal against bone. He slid into the driver's seat without looking back at the street, without checking the mirror. He didn't need to. If anything had followed him out of that office, he would have felt it already. Koda jumped up beside him, landing light despite his size, then turned once before settling. Not relaxed, just positioned. Ethan put the key in the ignition and paused. For a second, his hand stayed there, fingers wrapped around the worn plastic, thumb resting where it always did. The dashboard was cracked. The radio didn't work unless you hit it twice. The smell inside was old coffee and something colder underneath. He turned the key. The engine caught on the first try. That surprised him. It shouldn't have. He pulled out of the lot slow, tires crunching gravel, and drove without thinking about where he was going. The road out of town curved along the edge of low hills, bare trees reaching up like broken fingers against the sky. Montana didn't waste time pretending to be soft. By the time the last building disappeared in the rearview mirror, the sky had gone darker. Not night yet, just that gray stretch where everything felt unfinished. Ethan kept driving. He didn't turn on the headlights until the road forced him to. Koda's head lifted when the beams cut forward. His ears shifted, tracking movement that wasn't there. Or maybe was. Ethan didn't ask. He drove another 10 miles before pulling off near a turnout that overlooked nothing in particular. Just open land and a thin line of trees in the distance. He killed the engine. Silence came down hard. Too hard. His fingers tapped once against the steering wheel before going still again. Koda didn't move. For a while, neither of them did. Then Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head lowered just enough that the world narrowed to the inside of the truck. He closed his eyes. Bad move. It came back fast. Light first, too bright, white and sharp. Then sound, rotor wash hammering the air, radio chatter breaking apart into static. Someone shouting coordinates that didn't line up. Someone else yelling to move now. Ethan's eyes snapped open. His hand hit the door before he knew he'd moved. Breathing came short, controlled, forced through teeth that stayed clenched. He looked out the windshield. Dark trees, still air, no movement, no rotor, no dust, no voices. Koda shifted, pressing his head under Ethan's hand. Solid, warm, real. Ethan didn't look at him, but his hand stayed where it was, fingers curling slightly into the thick fur at the back of the dog's neck. Yeah, he muttered, voice rough. The truck creaked as the metal cooled. Somewhere far off, a coyote called once, then went quiet. Ethan leaned back slowly. He didn't close his eyes again. Hours passed without him noticing them. At some point, the sky turned black, then lighter again at the edges, the kind of slow change you only catch if you're not sleeping. He never was. When morning came, it wasn't sudden, just a gradual shift in color, gray to pale blue. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded paper. 70 acres. He unfolded it this time. Lines, boundaries, a stretch of land marked with coordinates that meant nothing on their own. He traced one edge with his finger. County Road 17. He knew that road. Hadn't been out there in years, not since before everything went sideways, before deployments stacked up and time stopped behaving the way it should, before his grandfather stopped calling. Koda's ears twitched as Ethan stared at the map. The dog lifted his head, looking past the windshield toward the distant tree line. Something there. Or maybe just memory. Ethan folded the paper again, slower this time. He slid it back into his jacket, then reached for the key. The engine turned over rougher now, like it had used up whatever goodwill it had left the night before. He let it idle a second. Didn't rush it. Didn't rush anything. Koda shifted upright in the seat, posture tightening, eyes fixed ahead. Not waiting. Expecting. Ethan pulled back onto the road. This time, he knew where he was going. County Road 17 wasn't far, but it didn't show up all at once. The turn came easy to miss. Just a break in the trees, a narrow stretch of gravel that looked like it didn't belong to anything. He slowed, looked once, then turned. The truck bounced as the tires hit uneven ground. Dust rose behind them, hanging in the air longer than it should have. Ethan kept his speed low. The road narrowed the farther he went. Branches leaned in closer. The sky disappeared overhead, replaced by thin strips of light between tangled limbs. No houses, no fences, no signs. Just land that had been left alone too long, or not long enough. Koda leaned forward slightly, nose working the air. His body changed, subtle, but Ethan saw it. Alert, focused, not curious. Working. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. The truck rolled deeper into the trees, tires crunching over old gravel that hadn't been touched in years. And somewhere ahead, beyond what the map showed and what the road admitted to, something waited. Koda knew it. Ethan could feel it. And for the first time since he left that office, the emptiness inside him shifted. Not gone, just moving, making room for something else. The road didn't stay a road for long. It narrowed into two faint tire tracks, then into something that only suggested a path because the trees allowed it. Branches brushed along the sides of the truck, dry and brittle, scraping against the metal in uneven strokes. Ethan slowed even more. The gravel faded under the tires, replaced by packed dirt and patches of loose stone. No fresh tracks, no recent use. At least not the kind most people would notice. Koda's head tilted slightly toward the windshield, nose working harder now. His body leaned forward without standing, weight shifting just enough to stay balanced as the truck moved. Focused. Ethan let the truck roll to a stop. He didn't shut the engine off right away. He sat there, eyes scanning past the hood, then to the sides, then back again. Tree line, ground cover, shadows between trunks. Nothing obvious, which didn't mean nothing was there. He killed the engine. Silence filled in fast, not empty silence, the kind with layers. Wind moving high above, not reaching the ground. A faint creak of wood shifting somewhere deep in the trees. Dry leaves brushing against each other. Ethan opened the door slowly. It creaked. Too loud. He paused, listening. Nothing reacted. Koda jumped down first this time, landing soft, already moving a few steps ahead before stopping and turning back. Waiting. Ethan stepped out, closing the door with controlled pressure until the latch clicked without slamming. He stood still for a moment, breathing steady, eyes adjusting. Then he moved. Not straight ahead. He angled slightly off the track, stepping where the ground looked firmer, avoiding loose patches, avoiding anything that might shift under weight. Koda didn't follow the track at all. The dog veered left, pushing into a narrow gap between low brush, moving with purpose that didn't match random curiosity. Ethan watched him go, then followed. The brush snagged at his jacket, thorns catching fabric, pulling just enough to slow movement. He worked through it without rushing, using his hands to push branches aside instead of forcing his way through. The ground changed underfoot. Less loose, more even. That's what made him stop. He looked down. At first glance, it was just dirt. Pine needles scattered across the surface, a few rocks half buried. But the spacing was off. Too consistent. He crouched, brushing aside a thin layer of needles with the back of his hand. The soil beneath was packed. Flattened. Used. Not recently, but not untouched either. Koda moved a few feet ahead, then stopped again, looking back. Ethan stood slowly. His eyes lifted, scanning the trees. That's when he saw it, spacing. Each trunk stood just a little too evenly apart from the next. Not perfect, not geometric, but close enough that it didn't happen by accident. He stepped closer to one of the trees, ran his fingers along the bark. There. A line. Faint old. A cut that had healed over years ago but hadn't disappeared, He moved to the next tree. Same height, same kind of mark. Not damage. Deliberate. Ethan straightened, his eyes moving farther out now, following the pattern instead of looking at individual details. The trees weren't random. They formed rows, subtle, hidden under years of growth and neglect, but still there if you knew what to look for. Koda let out a low sound. Not a bark, not a growl. Something in between. Ethan turned. The dog stood about 10 yards away, nose down, circling a small patch of ground near what looked like a broken stump. Koda's movements tightened. Focused. Ethan approached slowly, each step placed with care. The ground here looked different, slightly raised, like something beneath it had shifted the surface years ago and never quite settled back. Koda pawed at the dirt once, twice, then stopped, looking up at Ethan. Waiting. Ethan crouched beside him. He pressed his palm against the ground. Cool. Firm. Not natural. He pushed aside the top layer of dirt with his fingers. The soil gave way easier than it should have. Loose. Recently disturbed. Or at least, not as old as everything around it. He dug a little deeper. His fingers hit something solid, not rock. Too smooth. He cleared more dirt away, exposing the edge of metal. Flat. Weathered. A corner. Ethan froze for a second. Not from fear, from recognition. He looked around once more. Treeline. Still. Air, still. Nothing moving. He reached back to Koda, resting a hand briefly on the dog's shoulder. Solid. Then he turned back to the ground and started clearing more dirt. Whatever was buried there hadn't been put there by accident, and it hadn't been meant to be found by someone who wasn't paying attention. Ethan brushed the last layer of dirt aside with the edge of his hand. The metal surface underneath was dull, darkened by time, but intact. A rectangular lid, no bigger than a toolbox, set just below the earth like it had been waiting. Not hidden deep, just enough. He paused, fingers resting against the edge. Listened. Nothing moved in the trees, no shift in wind, no birds breaking flight. Too quiet, Koda stood close now, not circling anymore. Still, eyes scanning outward, not at the box. Watching perimeter. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He slid his fingers under the edge and pulled. The lid didn't give at first. Stuck. Sealed by years of dirt pressing down on it. He adjusted his grip, braced his weight, and lifted again. A low, dry crack broke the silence as the seal gave way. Koda's ears flicked. Ethan froze instantly. Every muscle locked. He waited, counted. 1, 2, 3. Nothing came, no movement, no sound answering back. He exhaled slowly and lifted the lid the rest of the way. Inside, the box was dry. That told him everything. Whatever had been buried here had been meant to last. There was no clutter, no random items, just 3 things. A folded piece of paper, thick, worn at the edges but protected. A smaller envelope sealed, and a piece of cloth wrapped around something heavier. Ethan didn't reach for anything yet. He looked at the arrangement. Intentional. Layered. Top to bottom. He picked up the folded paper first. Unfolded it carefully. A map. Hand-drawn. Lines cut through the shape of the land he'd just walked. Not like the one the lawyer gave him. This one had marks, symbols, small notations in tight handwriting. Not rushed. Patient. His grandfather's handwriting. Ethan recognized it immediately. The lines weren't random. They traced paths that didn't exist on the surface. Angled turns, points marked with small X's. One of them, right where he stood. Ethan's eyes moved across the rest of the page. Following. Tracking. The map led deeper. Off the visible track, into the part of the land no one would bother with. Koda shifted. Low. A sound deep in his throat. Ethan lowered the map slightly, glancing up. The dog wasn't looking at him. He was looking behind them. Ethan turned slowly. Nothing. Just trees. But the angle of Koda's stance changed everything. Weight forward. Ready. Not curious. Not cautious. Prepared. Ethan folded the map halfway, keeping it in his hand. His body adjusted without thought. Feet repositioning, shoulders turning just enough to reduce profile. Eyes scanning again. Tree line. Ground. Shadows. He held there. 5 seconds. 10. Still nothing. Then Koda's posture eased. Just a fraction. Ethan didn't relax. He turned back to the box. Picked up the envelope next. It was sealed, but not glued, folded closed. His name wasn't on it. Nothing was. He slid it open. Inside, a single strip of paper. Short. Written in the same steady hand. For the one who knows how to wait, Ethan read it once. Then again. The words didn't explain anything, but they confirmed something. This wasn't random. This wasn't forgotten. This had been planned. He slipped the note back into the envelope and set it aside. Last item. The cloth bundle. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a compass. Old. Metal casing scratched, but the glass intact. He tilted it. The needle moved clean. Still working. Ethan stared at it for a second longer than he meant to. Then he looked back at the map. The markings. The angles. They weren't random directions. They were bearings. His grip on the compass tightened slightly. Koda stepped closer, pressing lightly against his leg again. Grounding. Ethan folded everything back with care. Not rushed, not careless. He placed the map inside his jacket, then the envelope. The compass went into his pocket, separate. He lowered the lid back onto the box, not sealing it fully, just enough to cover it. No need to hide it again. Whoever it had been hidden from wasn't the one standing here now. He stood, looked out over the trees. The land didn't feel empty anymore. It felt layered, like something underneath it had been waiting longer than he had. Koda moved ahead a few steps, stopped, looked back. Not asking. Telling. Ethan exhaled once, then nodded. All right, he said under his breath. His voice was quiet, but steady. He adjusted his jacket, checked the weight of the compass in his pocket, then stepped forward. Off the visible ground, into the direction the map pointed. Koda moved first. Ethan followed. And somewhere beyond the trees, beyond what anyone had bothered to see for years, something else was waiting. Ethan didn't rush. He let Koda take the lead, but not by much. 10 feet ahead, no more. Close enough to read the dog's body language, far enough to let him work. The ground changed first. Less debris, fewer fallen branches, the kind of subtle shift you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. Ethan was. He angled his steps, matching the bearing he'd memorized from the map. Not straight, slightly off, correcting every few yards, adjusting like he used to when landmarks didn't line up with what the terrain said. The compass in his pocket pressed against his side with every step. Koda moved low, weaving between trees, pausing just long enough to test the air before moving again. Then he stopped. Not gradual. Instant. Ethan froze where he was. Koda's head lifted, ears forward, body stiff. Not fear. Recognition. Ethan dropped his weight slightly, lowering his center without thinking. His eyes scanned past Koda, following the dog's line of sight. At first it looked like nothing, just more trees. Then the pattern hit spacing. Cleaner. Clearer. Ethan stepped forward, slower now. The brush thinned out without warning, and then it was gone. The trees opened, not randomly, deliberately, rows, perfect rows. They stretched uphill in long, quiet lines, trunks rising straight and clean, branches starting high above the ground. No low growth, no tangled underbrush choking the base. Someone had cut it back, over and over again, for years. Ethan didn't move for a second, didn't breathe. The place didn't feel abandoned. It felt maintained, even now. Koda stepped forward into the open space, his posture shifting again, not searching anymore. Certain. Ethan followed. His boots hit the ground between the rows, firm, almost level, like it had been walked more than once, more than recently. He reached out and touched one of the trunks. The bark was rough, ridged, solid under his palm. Healthy. His fingers traced upward until they met smooth wood where branches had once been. Cut clean. Not broken, not fallen. Removed. Purposefully. Ethan stepped back, eyes lifting, tracking the length of the tree. Straight. No twists, no bends. Engineered. He turned slowly, taking in the rest. The rows climbed the slope, disappearing over the ridge. Dozens of trees, maybe more, all matching the same pattern. Not wild growth. Planted. Managed. Koda moved deeper, then stopped again, looking back. Waiting. Ethan followed the line the dog had chosen. Every step pulled him farther from the version of this land he'd been handed. Non-productive timber. That's what the paper said. Ethan exhaled once through his nose. Yeah, he muttered. Koda led him up the slope. The air shifted as they climbed. Cooler, quieter. No insects, no birds breaking through the canopy, just wind brushing the tops of the trees, too high to touch them. Halfway up, Ethan noticed something else. A gap. Not between trees. Between rows. Wider. Intentional. He stepped into it. The ground here was clearer, more compacted. Recently? No. But often. Koda's pace slowed. Then he angled right. Ethan followed. The slope leveled out near the top, and the trees thinned just enough to reveal something tucked into the far edge of the grove. A structure. Small, wooden. Barely visible through the trunks. Ethan stopped again. His eyes narrowed. The shape didn't belong to neglect. It wasn't broken down, not completely. Standing. Waiting. Koda didn't hesitate this time. He moved toward it, steady, confident. Ethan didn't call him back. He adjusted his path, stepping around the trees instead of cutting straight through, keeping angles, keeping lines of sight open. Old habits. The closer he got, the clearer it became. A cabin. Not large. One room, maybe two. Board siding darkened with age, roof sloped and intact, a metal chimney pipe rising from one side. No glass in the windows, but no rot either. Maintained. At least, it had been. Koda reached the front of it and stopped at the door. Sat. Looked back. Ethan closed the distance slowly. His boots made almost no sound on the packed earth near the entrance. He stopped just short of the door, looked at it, then at the ground. Footprints. No. Nothing fresh, but the threshold was worn, used, many times. He reached out. His hand hovered just inches from the handle, paused, listened. Nothing inside, no movement, no shift, just still air. Koda didn't move, didn't break focus. Ethan wrapped his fingers around the handle. Cold metal. He turned it slowly. The latch gave with a soft click. And for a brief second, just before the door opened, his breath held, like stepping into a room you hadn't cleared yet. Then he pushed the door inward. Darkness waited inside, and the faint smell of old wood, and something else. Something familiar. Ethan didn't step in right away, but he knew one thing for certain. This place had never been meant for anyone who didn't make it this far. Ethan stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Cooler. Still. Sealed in a way the outside world wasn't. Koda followed close behind, his nails clicking once against the wooden floor before he adjusted his stride, quiet again. The door creaked softly as it settled half open behind them. Ethan didn't turn to close it. Not yet. He stood just inside the threshold, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through the open doorway and the narrow window cut into the far wall. The smell hit him first. Old wood, oil, paper, and something faint beneath it. Metal, not rust, maintained. He moved forward slowly. One step, then another. The room wasn't large. A cot against one wall, a small cast-iron stove in the corner, a workbench under the window, and along the far side, shelves full. Koda moved ahead of him, sweeping left to right, nose low, then lifting, checking the air again. Clear. Ethan approached the shelves. Dozens of notebooks, stacked, lined up, ordered, not scattered, not forgotten. He reached out and pulled one free. The cover was worn smooth at the edges, no label on the front. He opened it. Handwriting filled every page. Tight, consistent, measured. His grandfather's. Ethan didn't flip through it quickly. He read. Dates, weather notes, soil conditions, growth measurements, tree by tree, row by row, years of it, decades. He turned another page, more entries, more details. Not rushed. Never rushed. Ethan's jaw shifted slightly. He set that notebook down and picked up another. Older. The ink faded, but still readable. The same pattern. Records of planting, cutting, pruning, spacing, each decision logged like it mattered. Because it did. He turned again. And then he stopped. A photograph slipped loose from between the pages and fell against the floor with a soft, dry sound. Koda's head turned at it, Ethan crouched and picked it up, black and white. His grandfather stood in the frame, younger, stronger, sleeves rolled up. Behind him, rows, the same rows, but smaller, younger trees, barely past sapling height. Ethan stared at it, same slope, same angle of light, same land. He looked up, through the doorway. The trees outside towered now, thick, mature, complete. He looked back at the photo, then at the notebooks. His fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the paper. This hadn't been a project. It had been a lifetime. Koda shifted closer, pressing against his side again. Ethan stood slowly. His eyes moved across the cabin again, slower this time. The workbench. Tools hung in place, each one outlined faintly on the wood behind it, like whoever used them had put them back the same way every time. A knife. Long, thin. Used for cutting, pruning. Ethan reached out, but didn't touch it. Didn't need to. He knew what it was. He turned back to the shelves. More notebooks, stacked in sequence. He pulled another from near the end, flipped it open. The handwriting changed slightly. Less steady. Still precise, but heavier in places. Later years. He scanned the page. Entries shorter now. Less detail, but still consistent. Still there. Still working. Even when it got harder. Ethan closed the notebook halfway, his thumb resting against the edge. He exhaled slowly. Not heavy, not sharp, just controlled. Then he set it back. He didn't take any of them. Not yet. Instead, he stepped back toward the center of the room. Koda turned with him. Always within reach. Ethan's eyes moved one last time across everything. The cot, the stove, the tools, the shelves. Nothing here was accidental. Nothing here had been left unfinished. He stepped back toward the door, paused at the threshold again, looked out. The grove stretched beyond, quiet and waiting, not abandoned, never abandoned. Ethan reached into his jacket, pulled out the folded map again, then the compass. He held them together now. Not separate pieces anymore. Connected. He glanced back once into the cabin, at the notebooks, at the life that had been built here piece by piece without anyone noticing. Then he stepped outside. Koda moved with him. The light hit stronger now, filtering through the rows of trees, casting long, straight shadows along the ground. Ethan stood there, just past the doorway. Still, thinking. Not about what he had been given, about what had been left behind. And why. Ethan didn't move from the doorway for a long time. The light shifted across the grove as the sun climbed, shadows sliding slowly between the rows, like something breathing beneath the surface. Koda sat just off to his right, facing outward, keeping watch. Not restless, not distracted, still working. Ethan finally stepped back inside the cabin. The air felt different now. Not just old. Intentional. He walked straight to the shelves this time, no hesitation. His eyes scanned the rows of notebooks again, but he wasn't looking for patterns anymore. He was looking for something else. Something set apart. Koda shifted behind him. A soft step. Then stillness again. Ethan reached toward the far end of the shelf, where the notebooks changed. Same covers, same size, but the spacing was tighter. Deliberate. He pulled one free. It didn't come out easily, caught on something behind it. He adjusted his grip and eased it forward, A folded piece of paper slipped loose from behind it and fell against the wood. Different from the others. Thicker. Older. Ethan crouched slowly and picked it up. His name was written across the front. Not printed. Written. Ethan. His grandfather's hand. No hesitation in the strokes. No fading. Like he'd written it knowing exactly when it would be read. Ethan didn't open it right away. His thumb rested along the fold. Koda stepped closer, pressed lightly against his shoulder. Ethan exhaled once, then opened it. The paper unfolded in 3 sections. Handwritten. Steady. Easier to read than the last notebooks. This had been written earlier, before things got harder. Ethan read, "If you're standing in this cabin, then you made it past the parts most people don't see." He stopped there for a second, not because he didn't understand, because he did. He kept reading. "I didn't leave you land because I had nothing else to give. I left it to you because you were the only one who ever stayed long enough to understand what it takes to keep something alive." Ethan's grip tightened slightly on the edge of the paper. The words didn't feel like a surprise. They felt like something he hadn't let himself expect. "You've seen what the others wanted. They'll take what can be counted, sold, spent. That's not a fault. It's just the way they were built." Ethan's eyes shifted for a moment, toward the open door, toward the world beyond the trees, then back to the page. This place isn't meant for that. The line sat there, simple, clear, final. He read on. "I planted every row knowing I wouldn't see it finished. That wasn't the point. The point was leaving something that didn't end with me." Ethan's jaw moved slightly, not clenching, just adjusting. "You were the only one who understood waiting, even when you didn't know you were learning it." A flicker. Not memory, something deeper, quieter. "You lost things early, more than most, but you didn't walk away from them. You carried them. That matters here." Ethan's breathing slowed, not forced. Natural. "I couldn't explain it to you while I was alive. You would have tried to fix it, tried to make it easier. This wasn't meant to be easy." The paper shifted slightly in his hands. A faint tremor. Gone as quickly as it came. "If you choose to walk away from this, no one will blame you. But if you stay..." The sentence broke there, not unfinished. Just paused, then continued below. "Then do it the right way. Take only what's ready, leave the rest, always leave the rest." Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Just one. When they opened again, they didn't move, didn't search. They stayed on the page. "There's enough here to carry you, not all at once, not fast, but enough, if you're willing to wait." He reached the end. No signature. Didn't need one. Ethan folded the letter slowly, carefully, like it mattered. Because it did. He didn't put it back. He slid it into his jacket, inside, close. Koda leaned into him slightly, the weight grounding. Ethan stood. Turned toward the door again. The grove waited outside. Same as before, but not the same. Not anymore. He stepped out. The air felt sharper, clearer. His eyes moved across the rows. Not searching. Understanding. This hadn't been a mistake. Not the land, not the will, not any of it. It had been chosen. Deliberately. Ethan exhaled once, then nodded, almost to himself. All right, he said quietly. Koda's ears shifted at the sound. Then he moved forward into the grove again. This time, Ethan didn't hesitate. He followed. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because for the first time in a long time, he knew exactly where he was supposed to be. That didn't mean the world was going to leave him alone. By the time Ethan drove back toward town that evening, dust trailing behind the truck in long, pale ribbons, the feeling had already started to shift. Not inside him. Outside. Something subtle. The kind you didn't see directly. The kind you felt in how people looked at you half a second longer than they should. He stopped at a gas station just outside town. Same place he'd passed 100 times before. Same cracked pavement. Same humming fluorescent lights that never quite stopped flickering. Ethan stepped out of the truck, stretching his back slightly. Koda stayed in the cab at first, watching through the window. Then the dog's ears pricked. Ethan followed the shift without turning his head. A man stood near the side of the building, pretending to check his phone. Watching. Not obvious. But not careful enough either. Ethan walked inside without reacting. The bell above the door rang once. Inside smelled like coffee that had been sitting too long and something fried hours ago. The clerk nodded without interest. Ethan grabbed a bottle of water. Didn't browse. Didn't linger. When he stepped back outside, the man by the wall had moved closer. Late 50s, lean, worn jacket, eyes sharper than the rest of him. "Hey," the man said casually. "That your truck?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He twisted the cap off the bottle, took a drink, then lowered it. "Yeah." The man nodded slowly, like he'd expected that. "Seen you heading out past County 17 earlier," he said. "Not many folks go that way." Ethan's eyes rested on him now. Still. Flat. "Just passing through," Ethan said. The man smiled faintly. "Didn't buy it." "Name's Dale," he said, extending a hand that Ethan didn't take. "Dale Mercer." Ethan didn't move. Koda jumped down from the truck behind him, landed quiet, came to Ethan's side without a sound. Dale's eyes dropped to the dog. The smile faded just a little. "Good dog," he said. Koda didn't respond, didn't wag, didn't break eye contact. Just watched. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, enough to put himself between Dale and the truck without making it obvious. "Land out there's been sitting empty a long time," Dale went on. "People say it's not worth much." People say. Ethan took another drink of water. Let the silence sit. Dale studied him a moment longer, then nodded once like he'd confirmed something for himself. "Well," he said, stepping back, "just thought I'd ask." He turned and walked off without waiting for a reply. Ethan watched him go. Didn't follow. Didn't need to. Koda's posture stayed tight until the man disappeared around the side of the building. Only then did the dog relax slightly. Ethan tossed the empty bottle into the truck bed and climbed back in. He didn't head into town. He turned away from it. Back toward the road he'd just come from. The sun was dropping now, light thinning across the hills, shadows stretching longer across the land. By the time he reached the turnoff again, the sky had gone orange at the edges. He didn't slow this time, didn't hesitate. He drove straight in. Dust rose behind him again, but this time it didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. It felt like he was returning. The truck rolled to a stop near the edge of the grove. Ethan cut the engine, sat there a second, listening. Nothing. No movement. No voices. Just wind above the trees. Koda jumped down first, moved ahead a few steps, then stopped. His head turned sharply toward the far edge of the grove. Ethan's eyes followed. There. A faint shape between the trees. Too far to make out clearly. Gone as soon as he focused on it. Ethan stepped out slowly. Didn't call out. Didn't move fast. He stood still, scanning the tree line. Waiting. Koda let out a low growl. Barely audible. Ethan's jaw tightened. The land wasn't empty anymore. Not the way it had been that morning. Someone had come, or was coming back. And they weren't here to admire the trees. Ethan exhaled slowly, then stepped forward into the grove. This time, he didn't just walk it. He watched it. Every shadow, every gap between trunks, every place someone could stand without being seen. Koda stayed close now, closer than before. No more leading. Guarding. And somewhere out there, beyond the rows, beyond what the map had shown, the first ripple had started, and it wasn't going to stay quiet for long. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the cabin, not on the cot, not fully. He sat against the wall beneath the window, back straight, legs stretched just enough to keep circulation steady. The door remained closed now, but not locked. No point. If someone wanted in, a lock wouldn't stop them. Koda lay near the entrance, head down, eyes open, watching. Time passed slow, the kind of slow that doesn't measure in hours, just in changes of light and sound. Every shift in the trees outside pulled Ethan's attention. Every creak of wood made his fingers tighten slightly against his knee. Once, a branch snapped. Far off. Koda's head lifted instantly. Ethan didn't move, didn't react outwardly, but his breathing changed. Shorter, controlled. He counted. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No second sound. Koda lowered his head again, but didn't relax. Neither did Ethan. The sky turned gray before it turned light. Morning came quiet. Too quiet. Ethan stood, joints stiff but responsive, and stepped outside. The grove looked the same, rows stretching uphill, shadows long and even. But something had changed. He felt it before he saw it. A shift in the ground near the lower rows. Subtle. Almost nothing. Ethan moved down the slope, slow and deliberate, scanning ahead, not just looking, but reading. Koda moved beside him now. Not leading. Guarding. They reached the edge of the grove where the rows met rough ground again. Ethan crouched. There. A print. Boot. Not his. Not old enough to fade. Not deep enough to belong to someone carrying weight. Recent. Koda let out a low, steady growl. Ethan's eyes tracked the direction. In. Not out. Someone had come into the grove and stayed long enough to move around. He stood slowly. Didn't follow the tracks right away. He scanned first. Always scan. Tree line. Gaps. Elevated ground. Nothing visible. That didn't mean clear. It meant concealed. Ethan stepped back uphill instead of forward, creating distance, changing angle. He moved across the rows, cutting diagonally until he had a higher vantage point. From there, he looked down. The pattern became clearer. Whoever had come in hadn't moved randomly. They had followed the rows, studied them, stopped at certain points. Ethan's jaw tightened. This wasn't curiosity. This was interest. Koda's ears shifted sharply. Then his whole body locked. Ethan followed instantly. Movement. Far edge. Between the trees. A figure. Gone as soon as it appeared. But not fast enough. Ethan had seen enough. Not a local kid wandering. Not someone lost. The posture had been wrong. Careful. Watching. Ethan exhaled once. Steady. Then turned. Back, he said quietly. Koda didn't hesitate. They moved uphill again, not retreating, but repositioning. Ethan didn't chase. Didn't call out. Didn't make himself known. That wasn't the move. Not yet. Back at the cabin, Ethan grabbed what little he had brought. Water, a small pack, nothing else worth taking. He didn't plan to leave, but he wasn't going to sit still either. Koda stood at the door, watching the trees. Waiting. Ethan stepped outside again. Different now. Not exploring. Not discovering. Operating. He moved along the outer edge of the grove this time, circling, checking lines of entry, points where someone could approach without being seen. There weren't many, which made it worse, because the ones that existed were chosen. Koda stopped suddenly, turned his head toward the lower slope, then he moved. Fast. Ethan followed instantly. No hesitation. They cut through the rows, boots and paws silent against the packed earth. Then Koda lunged. A blur of movement between the trees. A shout. Human. Ethan broke into a run, closed distance fast. He reached the edge of a clearing just in time to see a man stumble backward, arms raised defensively as Koda stopped short, teeth bared, growl deep and controlled, not attacking. Holding. The man froze. Late 30s, work jacket, not from town. Eyes wide, not with confusion, with recognition. He knew exactly where he was. Ethan stepped into view. Don't, he said, voice low. Koda didn't move, didn't break focus. The man swallowed. I was just... He started. Ethan didn't let him finish. Turn around, he said. The man hesitated. Koda's growl deepened. That was enough. The man turned, whoa. Hands still visible. Ethan watched every step, tracked every movement. No weapon visible. Didn't mean unarmed. Didn't matter. Walk, Ethan said. The man did. Koda moved with him, not touching, not needing to. They reached the edge of the grove. The man stopped, didn't turn back, didn't speak again. He just kept walking, faster this time, until he disappeared into the trees beyond. Ethan stood there a moment longer, then looked down at the ground. More prints. Not just one set. 2, maybe 3. He exhaled slowly. Koda stepped back to his side. Pressed close. Ethan didn't look at him. Didn't need to. They're coming back, he said quietly. Not a question, not a guess, a fact. And this time, they wouldn't come alone. Ethan didn't go back to the cabin right away. He stayed at the edge of the grove, watching the line where trees gave way to rough ground, the place where the man had disappeared. Koda stood beside him, shoulder brushing his leg, gaze locked in the same direction. Neither of them moved. Minutes passed. then more. Nothing came back. No second figure, no sound of branches breaking, no engine in the distance. But that didn't mean anything. It just meant they were careful. Ethan finally turned uphill. "Come on," he said quietly. Koda followed close. Back at the cabin, Ethan didn't sit, didn't rest. He moved, checked the door, the window, the sight lines through the trees beyond, every angle someone could approach from without being seen. Limited, but not impossible. He stepped inside and reached for the workbench. The tools hung exactly where they had been left years ago. He took the long pruning knife down this time, not for fighting, for utility. Weight in hand mattered. He tested the grip once, set it on the table within reach. Koda circled once near the door, then lay down again, but not fully. Front legs forward, head up. Watching. Always watching. Ethan stepped back outside. The sun had shifted higher now, light cutting clean lines between the rows. Beautiful, if you didn't know what you were looking at, if you didn't know what it was worth. That thought stayed with him. Worth. Not just to him. To others. Ethan walked down one of the rows slowly. He stopped at a tree halfway down the slope. Ran his hand along the trunk. Smooth where branches had been cut. Clean growth. Straight. He stepped back, looking up along its height. Measured. Not by numbers. By instinct. This one. He didn't know exactly how much it was worth. But he knew enough. Enough to understand why someone would come back for it. Or all of them. Ethan exhaled slowly, then kept walking. The rows stretched on. Hundreds of trees. Maybe more. A lifetime. His grandfather had built this knowing it would be found. Knowing it would matter. Ethan stopped again near the center of the grove. Koda moved ahead, then turned back, watching him. Waiting. Ethan's hand rested briefly against another trunk. He closed his eyes for just a second. And it came back. Not the grove, not the trees. Sound. Sharp. Close. A blast of air. Dirt hitting his face. Someone shouting his name. Cut short. Ethan's eyes snapped open. His body had already shifted. Weight dropped. Shoulders angled. Breathing tight. Ready. Koda stood instantly. Pressed against him. Solid. Present. Ethan blinked once. The grove came back into focus. Trees, light, silence. No smoke, no dust, no voices, just memory. He exhaled slowly. Longer this time. The tension didn't leave. It never did. It just settled. Ethan looked down at Koda. The dog's eyes stayed on him, steady, unblinking. "Yeah," Ethan muttered. Then he looked back at the rows. All of it. Standing. Waiting. And the words from the letter came back. Take only what's ready. Leave the rest. Ethan's jaw tightened. Behind that, another thought. Sell it. Walk away. Take the money. Fix everything fast. No waiting. No risk. It would solve a lot. No one would come back if there was nothing left. No grove. No reason. He stood there, the idea sitting in his mind longer than he expected, long enough to almost feel real. Koda shifted slightly, not moving away. Closer. Ethan looked down at him again. The dog's side rose and fell slow, steady, but there was a stiffness in the way he held himself. A favoring of one leg, subtle, but there. Ethan crouched, ran his hand along Koda's shoulder. The dog didn't pull away, didn't flinch, but Ethan felt it. A slight tension, not fresh, from earlier, from the lunge, from holding that man in place. Ethan's hand stayed there, for a second longer. Then he stood again. His eyes moved back across the grove, not seeing value, seeing time, years, effort, patience, something that hadn't been built to be taken all at once. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the letter again, didn't unfold it, just held it, weight in his hand. Then he slid it back. Decision. Not loud, not dramatic, just set. No, he said quietly. Not to Koda, not to anyone, to the thought itself. He looked out over the rows one more time. They don't get to take it, he added under his breath. Koda's ears shifted slightly at the sound, then relaxed. Ethan turned, started back toward the cabin. Not slower, not faster, steady. There was work to do now. Not just watching, not just waiting, choosing. And whatever came next wouldn't be decided by anyone standing outside those trees. Ethan started before sunrise, not because he had to, because that was when decisions felt clean. The grove held a different kind of silence at that hour. Not empty, just waiting. The air carried a faint chill, and the ground beneath his boots still held the night. Koda moved beside him, slower than before. Not weak, just careful. Ethan noticed, didn't comment. He walked the rows again, this time with purpose, not scanning for threats, selecting. He stopped at the same tree he'd studied the day before. Tall, straight, clean growth all the way up. No crowding pressure from the others around it. Enough space, enough age. Ready. Ethan stood in front of it for a long moment, hand resting flat against the bark, feeling nothing and everything. Koda sat a few feet back, watching. Not guarding now, witnessing. Ethan stepped back, reached for the tools he'd carried down from the cabin. Not much, just what he needed. He checked the angle once, the direction of the fall. The spacing between the neighboring trees, measured without thinking. Old instincts, just different application. He made the first cut. The sound broke through the quiet. Sharp, clean, final. Ethan didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He worked steady, not fast, not slow. Every movement controlled, deliberate. The cut deepened. Wood gave way in small increments, each one echoing slightly through the grove. Koda didn't move, just watched. Ethan shifted position, adjusting his angle. Second cut, then the final one. The tree didn't fall immediately. It leaned, paused, like it was deciding something. Then it gave. The sound wasn't violent, not like he expected. It came down slow, branches brushing against air, the trunk settling into the ground with a heavy, grounded finality. Ethan stood there, breathing steady, watching the full length of it now on the forest floor. The first one. He stepped forward slowly, knelt near the base, ran his hand across the exposed wood where the cut had opened it. Dark grain, tight, dense. He didn't need numbers to understand it. This was value. Real value. The kind that didn't come from taking everything. The kind that came from knowing when to stop. Ethan stayed there a moment longer, then stood. He didn't look around for approval, didn't expect any. But Koda stood now, moved closer, pressed lightly against his side. Ethan reached down, resting a hand briefly on the dog's head. "You did good," he said quietly. "Not about the tree. About everything." They worked the rest of the morning without rushing. One tree. Only one. Ethan stripped the lower branches, set them aside, cleared the space around it. He didn't cut more, didn't even consider it. By midday, the sun had climbed high enough to break fully through the canopy. Light settled across the fallen trunk. Clean. Clear. Ethan stepped back, taking it in. Not pride, not regret, just acceptance. From the edge of the grove, a sound carried faintly. An engine. Far off. Ethan's head turned. Koda's ears lifted instantly, both of them listening. The sound faded just as quickly as it came, gone before it could be tracked. Ethan didn't move toward it, didn't chase it. He just stood there, watching the direction it had come from. Then he looked back at the tree, then out across the grove. "They're watching," he said under his breath. Not fear, not doubt, just awareness. Koda shifted slightly, staying close. Ethan nodded once. "Let them," he added. He picked up his tools, turned back toward the cabin. The grove stood behind him, still full, still rising. One tree gone, hundreds left. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The next morning came slower. Not because the sun took its time, because Ethan did. He stood outside the cabin with a cup of coffee that had gone cold before he finished half of it, watching the grove breathe in the early light. Mist hung low between the rows, drifting just above the ground like something alive, something that didn't want to be rushed away. Koda stood beside him, closer than before. His weight leaned slightly into Ethan's leg, not enough to slow him, but enough to remind him he was there. Ethan rested his hand briefly on the dog's neck, felt the steady warmth, the quiet strength that hadn't left. They walked the grove together. No urgency now, just movement. The path between the rows felt different under Ethan's boots. Not because it had changed, because he had. He stopped at the cut tree, the one from yesterday. The exposed wood had darkened overnight, moisture settling into the grain. It didn't look broken. It looked opened. Ethan stepped around it slowly, measured the space it left behind. Not empty, adjusted. Light reached places it hadn't before. The trees around it shifted slightly in the wind, freer. He nodded once, then kept walking. Koda moved ahead a few steps, then stopped, waiting like always. Ethan followed. They climbed higher this time, past the older rows, toward the younger growth near the top of the slope. Smaller trees, thinner trunks, years behind the rest, but alive, growing. Ethan crouched near one, brushing aside the leaves at its base. The soil was good, not dry, not starved, maintained, even now. He pressed his fingers into it, felt the resistance, the life under it. Koda circled once and then lay down nearby, watching the tree, watching Ethan, guarding something that didn't even know it needed guarding yet. Ethan stood again, looked out across the entire grove from where he was. From this angle, it made sense. All of it. The rows weren't just planted. They were timed. A cycle. Older trees below, younger ones above. Always something ready. Always something growing. Always something left. Ethan exhaled slowly. Not heavy, just steady. The engine sound came again. Closer this time. He didn't turn immediately, didn't react like before. He just listened. Koda's head lifted, ears forward, but he didn't move. Neither did Ethan. The sound stopped somewhere down near the entrance to the grove. A truck. Door closing. Voices. Faint. Ethan finally turned, looked down the slope. 2 figures. Not hiding anymore. Standing at the edge where the trees began. Watching. Waiting. Ethan didn't move toward them. Didn't call out. He just stood where he was. Higher ground. Clear view. No advantage given. Koda stood beside him. Silent. Still. The men didn't come farther in. Not yet. They stayed at the edge. Looking. Measuring. Trying to understand what they were seeing. Ethan let them. Let them see the rows. Let them see the order. Let them see the scale. Then he turned away. Just turned. Like they didn't matter. Like the grove did. And he walked deeper into it. Koda followed without hesitation. The men's voices carried faintly behind him. Unclear, unimportant. Ethan didn't look back. He reached the top of the slope again, stopped at the edge of where the rows ended and the open ground began. The place where nothing had been planted yet, where something could be. He stood there for a long moment. Then he knelt. Used his hands to clear a small patch of soil. No tools, just fingers. The dirt gave way easily. He dug a shallow hole. Not deep, just enough. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out something small. A walnut. He hadn't realized he'd picked it up the day before, but he had. He turned it once in his fingers, then placed it in the ground, covered it, pressed the soil firm. Koda watched the entire time. Didn't move. Didn't interrupt. Just stayed. Ethan stood again. Looked down at the spot. Nothing visible. Nothing to mark it. Except that he knew. And that was enough. He turned. Looked out across the grove one more time. The rows. The trees. The space between them. The time inside them. All of it still standing. Still growing. Still waiting. Ethan exhaled slowly, then nodded once. Not to anyone. Not for anyone. Just acknowledgement. Koda stepped beside him. Close. Steady. And together, they walked back down through the trees. Not as something that had been left behind. Not as something that had been given away. But as something that had been trusted to last. And would. If this story stayed with you, drop a simple one in the comments. If you believe some things are worth protecting, no matter how long it takes, comment, stay. And if you're still here at the end, you already know, not everything valuable shows up fast. Hit subscribe, and come back for the next story. Because some stories aren't just told, they're found.